Hello everyone and welcome to this video. Today in this video I'll be showing you how you can create a Express backend server. However, this server will be a bit different from normal Express server because we'll be adding a sort of abstraction on top of everything using TypeScript. Now, when I say that we're using TypeScript, I generally mean using decorators. You can actually replace them with functions as well if you want to, but I would suggest using decorators at least for once so that you can at least try and give them a shot. Also, we'll be creating an API using class-based approach. So this will be different than a functional approach. However, this will be much more easier to think about, and also you'll be really surprised to see how much abstraction we're able to create through this. So right here, as you can see, I'm right now on my home folder. I will be switching over to desktop. So we'll be creating a new directory and let's call it Express backend. Let's switch over to it. So right here we're in Express backend. For this project I'll be creating a simple npm I, or not npm I mean npm init, and I'll be passing in a -y. So there we have it. Let's head into it. Okay, so all we have right now is the package.json file. However, I will be using yarn for this, not npm. It's up to you. If you want to use npm, it's completely fine. All right, so first we'll be needing some dependencies to create this thing. The first thing that I want to do is let me say using npm again. So I'll be installing some dependencies first of all. So let's install cross-env because we want to make sure that our application runs everywhere, no matter which operating system we're on. I will also be installing .env for reading environmental files. And then we'll be installing the most important thing, that is the Express server itself. And then we'll be installing Morgan to log every activity that happens. Here we'll also be installing something called reflect metadata, and I'll be telling you what that is. And then we'll be installing Winston. So just in case you don't know, Winston is a logging library for Node.js. So let's press enter. Now let's go ahead and install some developer dependencies since we'll be using TypeScript here. So I'll be doing, again I'm doing npm, so there's a yarn add and we're prefixing it with -d, and let's install some types. So we have types for Express. We'll be installing types for Morgan. We'll be installing types for Node itself, since we'll be using Node types as well. By the way, a good point that we have here is that I have linked everything down below in the description, so you don't want to type all this, you can simply copy paste it. We'll be installing concurrently, and we'll be installing NodeMon since we need that for like the main stuff that we'll be doing. Then we'll be installing Prettier. We'll be installing rimraf, which is exactly similar to Linux's rmrf or sudo rmrf. However, if you're not on Linux, that would still help. We'll be installing tsnode, and we'll be installing, of course, TypeScript. So let's press enter and add that. Now right here we'll be doing one more thing, that is, since we need pretty much good configuration of our project, we'll be doing npx eslint init. By the way, this will be installing everything using npm, so I'll be showing you how you can just simply get rid of the npm stuff and come back to yarn. However, using npm, you don't need to do that. I will be telling you, by the way, which part of that is. So simply do npx eslint init. We'll be saying that we need to check syntax, find problems, and enforce code styles. It's up to you if you want to do that. I'll be sticking with the second one since we're using Express, not React or something else like that. We'll be using JavaScript modules, which is import and export. And we don't use any of the React or Vue.js. And yes, our project uses TypeScript. And this will run not on browser, but Node, remember that. And we can, you can choose JSON if you want, or YAML. I would prefer JavaScript, by the way. And yes, we will have to install all this using npm. All right, now once that is installed, npm users can simply stop here. By stop here, I mean you don't need to follow the next step. But if you're using yarn, you need to have a look at this. We're also generating a package.log.json file, which is not recommended since you already have yarn.log. So I'll be getting rid of the package.log.json file. Don't do that if you're using npm. You don't need to do that. And now I'll be simply doing yarn just one time so that everything is again installed by yarn and added to the yarn dependencies as well. So once that is done, we are on the same page. Let's go ahead and have a look at our package.json file and see what it has done till now. So we have quite a lot of things installed. However, there's one more thing that we need to do. So if you're using TypeScript with Eslint, you need to add one more thing since we're using special packages right here. So I'll be adding, let's say, yarn add. This should be added as developer dependency. So let's install Eslint. We'll be adding plugins, by the way, and it should be import. And then we need Eslint plugin Prettier. We need these two since we'll be plugging in Prettier as well. So let's just press enter. Alrighty, now that should be done, and we'll be seeing everything right here in the project package.json file. Let's go ahead and set some things up. So first of all, before we even get started, we need to configure Eslint. So open our eslint.js file and we'll be doing quite a lot of stuff here, but let's just stick with what we can do right now. All right, so let's just save this, and you might be seeing something like module is not defined. Trust me, you don't need to worry about it right now. Now right here where it says Eslint recommended and plugin TypeScript Eslint recommended, we need to add one more thing, and it should be prettier. Now once that is done, we need to add one more thing here. We'll be doing quite a lot of it rather than that. So we'll add a new property called overrides. Make sure there are 2 R instead of 1. So there are 2 R's going to be there. And then overrides. This should be an array, by the way. Let's just say files. We'll do star.ts because we need to look for TypeScript files. And we need to add parser options here. Should not be this, by the way. Just like that should do. And we need to add the project settings, and this should be /tsconfig.json. We'll be generating this file right now, by the way. So once that is done, I think we're pretty much done here. We'll be adding some rules, by the way, and we need to also add in a plugin here. That should be prettier. Now for the rules part, rather than typing them out, I will be copy pasting them. So we're removing that import extension part that you just saw here, which is some basic settings, really not some stuff, really too complicated stuff here. Now we'll be adding a new file here. There should be Eslint ignore, and it should ignore 3 things. The first thing should be node module, since we don't need that, of course. Second is the dist folder, and just in case, the build folder. Now let's create a new file called .prettierrc, and we can configure prettier here. So let's just create an empty object, type in single quote, and single quote should be true because that's what Eslint generally follows. We'll also be adding print width, which should be set it to line. Now generally this depends upon how comfortable you are, and generally people follow like 80 print width. I will be keeping 80 for the project. For other projects that I have done, I generally keep it to 120. Now it's completely up to you. We'll be also adding trailing commas to be all rather than ES5, which is, this is our general prettier.rc file. Similarly, just as we created before, we'll be creating a .prettier ignore file, which will be, it should be pretty much same as Eslint ignore, so you can just copy paste this. No issue right there. There we go. So that does at least half of the part. Let's create another file that should be .getignore. It's generally a good idea to keep track of your project, so always do that. For this one, I might not be keeping track of it, but I will be copy pasting a lot of stuff since here because I don't feel like writing that big of a thing. You can get all this from the hosted source code that I have given in the description. All right, now once that is done, we need to use TypeScript to initialize this. So I will be leaving a link below down in the description if you don't know how to install TypeScript into your system. If you don't know, make sure that you check that link or whatever it is out, because that might be helpful for you. Since this is not a TypeScript video, so we'll be moving ahead. I'll be doing tsc-init, and it should generate a tsconfig.json file. Now trust me, this file is going to be huge. So as you can see, there's an error here, and so by the way, just to fix this up, I can just simply close it and reopen it. So that happens all the time because whenever you're switching between a tsconfig file or like a TypeScript project, happens all the time. So I will be again copy pasting stuff here, since I personally like to go through everything and configure them one by one. So I have already configured it, and I will be copy pasting it. You can do the same from the project repository. All right, here they are. So that done, let's create a new folder, call it src for source. Now a bit of convention, if you want to do that, you can also create a public folder, since this is going to be our API, so make sure that you do that. Inside of source, we will be creating our files. So let's just go ahead and create an index.ts file. This is just for the sake of like it being just running it out. So I'll be logging just stuff here, and let's say hello. Wow, that's a really good spelling. Let's just save it, go back to package.json file, and we will be doing a lot of stuff here back now. So let's get started by creating some scripts, and by some I mean a hell lot of scripts. So let's just create a build script first of all. It should do simply tsc just to compile the project. Let's create a format script to format our project, and we'll be doing prettier, prettier, and we'll be showing --write. By the way, I'll just copy paste it rather, since it's going to be a huge time writing all this stuff. So here are the scripts that we'll be using, by the way. So the first thing that we're using is to build. We're using build command to build our entire thing by using tsc itself. We're checking formatting. This is to, you can either enable, so if you go into your settings and enable format on save, that should do the same stuff. But however, we'll be doing that at the end of the project whenever we're creating. We're also enabling a linter using Eslint. We're also checking types before we even commit everything stuff. We're also checking formatting. Then we are running a build watch command. We're also running a run command. So this build watch, actually what it does is that it just simply runs TypeScript on watch mode, and run is like to run the nodemon on the builded, completed, or the generated application. And finally, we're using start dev to run these two scripts at the same time by using cross env to set the node environment to development right here through the passed in command lines. And then we're using concurrently to run those things together. We're also creating a start production to enable start production app, and there's a simple start stuff, which is like general sense doing it. Also, I want to modify the license to MIT, not ISC. So that should do our job. Let's try doing yarn. What do we have? Build to see if it runs actually and generates everything for us. And now we have a test folder which generates the like the type file, the map file, and the original stuff that we have, which is literally empty right now. Just for the sake of it, and let's just simply start our server. We'll say yarn start dev, and that should start the development server, and it should like exit immediately, to be honest, as you can see. So let's see what it says first of all. Now this is to say that it will be looking for index.js file. However, no worries, we'll just get started right now. So now comes the important part and the most harder part. We need to first create a class that will be initializing everything inside of our React project, and that should be the hardest thing and one of the most important thing in this video. So just for the sake of it, I'll be removing this index.ts file since we don't need it, and I will be creating a new file. It should be called bootstrapper. I generally like to call it that way, bootstrapper.ts. And now this is where you will see these errors popping up because it won't be able to find all those things, but just simply don't mind it. Now first of all, let's create a class and let's call it Express application, and we'll also be exporting this class default. So let's just do export default Express application. This is where we'll be ending this video, and after this we'll be creating like doing the main stuff that we have, and that should be in the next upcoming video. So I hope you enjoyed this. Make sure that you come around and stick around to the next video as well.